Margie is spearheading the Federation's recent efforts to cut global warming pollution from power plants and efforts to push the EPA to protect the drinking water of 117 million Americans. She has helped oversee passage and implementation of renewable energy standards in 20 states and the passage of vehicle emission standards in 12 states. Under her direction, Environment America Federation has grown to include 29 state-based groups and more than 1 million members, donors and activists and allies in all 50 states. Please join me in welcoming Margie Alt for a keynote presentation titled Protecting the Places We Love and the Values That We Share.
Hi, it's lovely to be here late in the afternoon. Part of my bio that didn't come out, well, somebody said before everybody has biases, so the part of my bio that didn't come out that I'll just put right on the table is, yes, I've done all those things, but I started my career 30 years ago because I was a very angry young woman, and I stand here today as a pretty angry middle-aged woman, and all of this, to me, is about how we better organize people together to have more power so we can have the kind of world that we want to live in. And we've had a lot of conversation over the last couple of days about what should the policies look like and what are the technologies that are going to get us there. And I believe all of that is critical, but we've also heard seeds throughout the last couple of days about stories and about messages and about messengers, but also about hope. And I thought I would start by sharing my vision of what the world would look like if we actually succeeded, and then back into what I think it'll take to make sure that we get there. So to start, I believe that we can and should live in a world where asthma isn't the biggest cause of kids missing school days, and older people shouldn't be stuck in their homes when it's super hot out, and people with weakened immune systems shouldn't be dying early because of air pollution that we're putting into the air. And we know traditional pollutants cause a lot of that air pollution, and it's exacerbated by climate change, and there's just no reason for it. We can and we should live in a world where it's just easy to go outside and gulp a big breath of air and feel great about it. That's the world I want to live in. I'm sure you do too. Similarly, we shouldn't live in a country where what happened in Flint, Michigan can happen. Not only should people not be drinking lead-contaminated water, not only should thousands of kids not be suffering, probably for the rest of their lives with health implications, but we should know about this because the problem is probably not just in Flint. There are likely to be hundreds of other cities across the country that are experiencing this same problem, and that shouldn't be how it is in 2016 in the United States of America. And it's not just our drinking water. All of our water should be safe and clean. We shouldn't have a dead zone in the Chesapeake Bay or in the Gulf of Mexico where nothing can live because nutrient pollution has squeezed all the oxygen out of the water, and our plants and our phytoplankton and our fish can't survive. We are better than that. We should live in a country where all of our waterways are safe for fishing and swimming, and everybody can have total confidence that what comes out of your tap is safe and clean and healthy, and your kids are not going to be hurt by drinking a glass of water at school. We should live in a nation where our most special places, whether they're our beaches or our beautiful public lands, are safe from drilling and mining. Our species shouldn't be worried about being oil-soaked because of a disastrous accident by an oil tanker or a drilling rig. We are better than this. In fact, in my world, we would live in a nation where every kid could go to the park. It would be less than 10 minutes away. They could easily walk there with their families and feel safe to play outside in some green space. And it's not just the local park experience that we want for everybody, but we want our national icons like the Grand Canyon to be here, not just for us, not just for our children, but for our children's children and generation and generation and generation to come. There should be no threat of uranium mining just 6 miles away from the Grand Canyon. We are better than that, and we need to be. And so we also need to be thinking about our food source, and we've talked a little bit about that over the last couple of days, but we should live in a country where growing and eating food is not only nutritious and healthy, but delicious. And growing that food should be good for our ecosystem. We don't need huge factory farms that are creating all sorts of air and water pollution. We don't need to be sucking nutrients out of the soil. We don't need to be killing off our bees and other pollinators. We are better than that, and we should make sure that our food supply is local, it's sustainable, it's organic, it's healthy, and pollinators are here to stay. It isn't that hard. We are capable of doing all this and more. And really, when it comes down to it, we should be making sure that we do everything we can to stave off the worst negative impacts of global warming. And when I think about that, I have to admit that I've been working on global warming even longer than we called it global warming. And though I knew the science, and I knew the technology, and I knew the politics, and I knew the facts, I have to admit, even for me, global warming didn't become personal until it did. And that was just a couple of years ago during Superstorm Sandy. I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in a city called Long Beach, New York, which is on the south shore of Long Island. And what made Long Beach was the Long Beach. And not only was it a gorgeous long beach, but it had a beautiful boardwalk where we used to ride our bikes as kids and go to the rides with my grandma. And it was the center of town. And then when Superstorm Sandy came, it wasn't everything that town was built on. It was devastated. The beach ran into the ocean. The boardwalk was ripped off of its moorings and no more. And honestly, it wasn't just the beach and the boardwalk, but the communities and the people who were affected by Superstorm Sandy. So my brother lives, or I should now say lived, only 10 miles away from where we grew up. And the first floor of his house was devastated, and his cars were totally ruined, and it took them about a year or so to rebuild. And then just 3 or 4 months ago, my brother actually moved, and they moved for one reason, to get to higher ground, because they were sick of living in fear of when the next storm was going to happen. And none of the facts I've known about carbon and methane, and nothing I've known about fossil fuels and clean energy prepared me for what it felt like to have my own family, my own childhood, go up like that because of Superstorm Sandy. And so when I think about what we need to be doing in this country, what I'm thinking about is how we all work together and organize ourselves and each other to do what it will take to create this vision that I'm sure most of you share with me: clean air, clean water, special places, safe and healthy food systems, in a planet that's habitable and in fact enjoyable for future generations. And in my mind, the number one thing we can do is transition off of fossil fuels and to 100% not only clean, but renewable energy in the next couple of decades, not just for electricity, but for everything that runs this society. And the truth of the matter is that is more than possible to do. As we have been talking about, we have all sorts of technology that will enable us to do it. We have all sorts of resources that will enable it to do it. So what I want to walk back to is a couple of the reasons it would be so valuable: no air pollution, no water pollution, no wasted energy, little or no water consumption in producing our energy, no drilling or mining, no coal trains, no oil trains, no spills, no gases, no leaks, no poison, no pollution. Plus, most of the fuel would then be free and local, and we could control much of it ourselves. So a couple of reasons why I believe not only we need to, but that we can do this. The first is we have so much renewable capacity, not only in this country, but in the world. We could power all of the US needs, 100% of them, 100 times 100% of our needs with just the sun. In fact, NREL says we can get to about 39 or 40% of the power we need just with rooftop solar. We could also power about 10 times the amount of energy we need just with wind. And the good news is we have both of those things, and we don't even need all of the capacity that it would give us. We can also do this because the cost is going down. There's been a lot of discussion about this in the last couple of days, but solar PV costs about a quarter of what it did just 5 years ago, and so do the other technologies. We can afford to do this. We also know that we can do it because, in fact, we are doing it. We are moving beyond our projections every single year. And not just pretty conservative government projections, but we've shot past Greenpeace's projections for what we could do in terms of solar and wind and other clean renewable deployment for the whole world in just the last couple of years. So we know that we can make it happen. And we know that we are doing it right here at home. In 2015, 2/3 of the new capacity was all renewable. In the first quarter of this year, 98 to 99% of new capacity was all renewable. We absolutely can do this. And more studies are telling us we can do it. Everybody from professors at Stanford to activist and advocacy groups like mine to NREL and other government agencies. Everywhere we're looking, we're seeing more and more evidence that not only is this desirable, but it's quite possible. And so as I think about where we should go in this country, what my vision is, and I hope you share it for where we get and how we get to 100% renewables, I just wanted to finish with a couple of thoughts. One is that we know the technology is advancing. So many people in this room have shared that with us. We know there's electric vehicles. We know there's wind, there's solar. There are other technologies moving in the right direction. There's capacity to store all of this. And we're even starting to take a bite out of the bigger problems, the ones that have been intractable and really hard to move. So that's all really good news. And then let me finish with a couple of thoughts for how to make sure that we get there. And the first is we just need to agree to the vision. We need to set as ambitious a vision as we need, and I believe it's a vision for clean air, clean water, special places, and healthy families and communities. And if we agree to that, we have a path toward making it happen. The second is we have to use as little energy as we possibly can. And ACEEE says within a couple of decades, we could reduce the demand for energy in this country, regardless of population, by 40 to 60%. So the less we need, the easier it is to meet those demands with clean, renewable energy. Obviously, we need to keep pushing forward on deploying renewables. We're already in very good shape on that. Next, we need to electrify everything, because if we're plugging our cars into a totally renewable grid, we will be using no dirty energy in that whole process, so that will really put us ahead. Obviously, we need to modernize the grid to make all of that possible. And then a couple of the harder things. We have to keep fossil fuels in the ground. We cannot keep pulling them out of the ground and assume they are not going to get burned. And in fact, we have to start actively and aggressively saying no to any new fossil fuel infrastructure. No new pipelines, no new plants, no new facilities. We just have to be willing to put our vision first, our clean air, our clean water, our special places first, our kids' health first, our communities first, and that's how we're going to get to the 100% renewable future. And together, if we do that, we will build the political will that will give us the power and organize our might to overcome the incumbent energy interests and others that stand in our way. And we know this country has been capable of doing this before. I'm sure, the horse and buggy manufacturers were sitting around one day, and the next thing you know, there wasn't that much demand for it. They didn't expect it. But we've also done it with technology. Remember, we did put a man on the moon. We are going to have a woman president. I would think we can get to 100% clean, renewable energy in our lifetime. And from my perspective, I want to do it with you, with all Americans who share those values. And again, thank you so much for having me today.